to Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive, aka an animal communicator and a Reiki master practitioner here at animallovelanguages.com. And on my shoulder here, those of you who are watching the vlogcast version, it's no surprise that I've got a little winged one here. His name is Pearl Cutts. He is my feathered soul bird and sidekick, and he never misses an episode. And here in season 3 of Let's Talk to Animals, of course, if you've been following along with us, either watching the videos or listening to the podcast, you know we're all about demystifying animal communication, de-wooing it, if you will. What is it? How does it work? Who can do it? How can I learn? What can you do with it? But there's this point in the conversation that I experience this every day with my human clients when their pet has shared some information and we get to that moment where the question becomes, now what? Or what next? And so for season 3, I've decided we're going to shift gears a little bit. Yeah, we're still going to talk about animal communication, but in some very innovative ways. I'm so excited to have Chrissy Messick here with us today. She is from the animalnature.com, and Chrissy is doing some really innovative and very cool work combining intuitive animal communication with canine training. And I am so excited. Chrissy, welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. I'm so excited you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's fun. We were just chatting right before I pushed record, right? That super fear factor moment when we're like, okay, it's pre-recording, but we're still live.
Okay, yeah.
And we were just chatting a little bit about how cool it is to be able, when many of our guests do have twin passions, or even multiple passions. And it's very rare that we get to talk about the things that we're most passionate about, we most love, all in one sentence, so to speak. And more I am finding, especially in the guests I'm able to bring on the show here for season 3, that there is a natural intersection. There is an entry point for animal communication. And so I'm really excited to share your story. Now, of course, your background in education, I was fascinated by this, is actually your foundation was in education and training and athletics for humans, Olympic humans, no less. So, and that's probably a whole podcast in and of itself. That must have been amazing. But what was it? Can you just take us back to the moment when you started to feel that inner shift and you realized you wanted to take everything that you've learned about, how the human body and the human instrument works, the human vehicle, if you will, and transition that to working with animals, and kind of just walk us through how you made that transition? Share a little more of your story.
Yeah, well, I worked in sports medicine for about 20 years. And then towards the end of that career, I got married and started having kids. And so I realized that I didn't want to work 90 hours a week and travel every weekend. So I kind of stepped back and we moved. And I was like, what do I want to do now? Like, I want to focus on the kids. So I really focused on the kids, just getting them through their little baby and toddler years and stuff. And I started, what I continued doing, because I wanted to keep part of myself alive,
Yes. It's a very natural desire, I think.
Yeah. And so I just worked with clients privately, doing the athletic training and that kind of stuff. And then I just realized I'm supposed to be doing something else. I need to do something else. And definitely got a good foundation of, the body, physical, psychological, mental, emotional, that kind of stuff. And so I've always loved animals. So I started volunteering at the Humane Society, Boulder Valley Humane Society. I live in Colorado. And so I started volunteering there in the behavior services department. And at the same time, I was going through a lot of personal growth and working with a life coach. And she got me to the point where, because I was like, what is my purpose here? And I was like, animals, I love animals. I always have. And then like animal communication. I'm like, I know there's more to understand about them and to connect about with them. And so I told her, I'm like, I think I need to go look into animal communication. And she's like, well, that's as far as I go.
Okay. All right. Talk about being fired by your coach when you find your dream, right?
Well, it was interesting because I know she got me to that point, which was crucial. And so I started taking an animal communication course, in Boulder. So I was doing both of them at the same time. And I was like, I know these are going to intersect at one point, just doing both together. So, for a few years, I was just learning about animal communication. I was learning about, dogs and behavior sciences. And so then 5 years ago, I was like, I'm going to start my own business. And so I started The Nature of Animals. And so I just started training dogs and have worked my way up to more complicated cases. And at the same time doing animal communication. And then probably a few years ago, I just started doing them together. And I've been kind of trying to figure out the best way to do that without wearing myself out. Because the dog training is very emotionally tiring. And animal communication is also, it takes energy out of you. So anyway, so I guess that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And I'm still trying to, figure out the best way efficiently to do them together. And I think part of it, when I'm just training the dogs, it just kind of happens naturally without even me trying to work at it. And so that's kind of fun too. So that's how it came about so far.
Oh, it's just intriguing because it almost, it in many ways, with my own journey as an animal communicator and a Reiki practitioner, and then now that I'm training students of my own in animal communication, it very much often feels like, and also with my colleagues and my fellow students that I've kept company with as we've taken courses together, we often feel like the animals call us into this work. And because of that, it can feel very much outside of any box. And it's not uncommon to find ourselves having these conversations like, oh, I'm still trying to kind of figure it out, or I'm still trying to, like, I can feel it. It almost feels like we're an animal communication version of Einstein. Well, I see the theory of relativity all around me, but I can't tell you how it works yet. And it often has that same element of it's a somewhat mysterious alchemy, and there's an element of trust that it feels like it has to come into it. And if we're not willing to go there into that unknown space of something that's felt but not yet thought into life, it's not going to be born. Mm-hmm. And it really feels like that is the beautiful mystery of, and that's really, here on the show that you and I were chatting right before that, it's about sometimes we have to be the brave one. And sometimes maybe, maybe this particular episode is going to cross somebody's path and they are not going to know how the heck the internet, the great think tank that is the World Wide Web somehow landed them on this particular episode, and they're going to listen to it and go, oh my goodness, I don't have to feel like a bunch of separate, disconnected moving parts where I'm doing this and I'm hiding that, and then I'm doing that, and then I'm hiding this. And it's like somehow there's a way to help animals and the planet and, keep a roof over our heads and do all of the other things. And it's not, we don't have to break the system, but just find creative ways to evolve the system, even, so to speak. And so what I'm really curious about, and I have a feeling a lot of our our canine pet parents are really going to be intrigued about is how do you mentioned that now it just kind of happens, but it's like, at what point or how do you feel your canine clients just starting to communicate with you? Is it mostly, when we study, you and I both studied animal communications, it's like, okay, pairing mental pictures and emotions and sensations in the body. And so how are you aware of when you're in training sessions, or maybe it even feels like your canine clients are training you, sometimes, but can you share a little bit more about what that's like for you and how you know it's the right moment to communicate, or are you just having an ongoing dialogue that's just so seamless? It's like, well, and you need me to explain this why,
I know. That's the part that I've been trying to figure out, because it's happened many different ways. Like sometimes it'll happen where I will intentionally do a reading of the animal, the canine, before I meet with them to get information, and just it's a little bit of a case study, like I'm doing some of my own.
It does feel that way.
Yeah, I'm doing some of my own case studies, because we can go into, that's a whole nother episode, is the science behind it all.
Yeah.
But so sometimes I will connect with them before I even meet with them, and I'll get information. So I'll do that intentionally. And then sometimes, or if I'm doing a day training client, it just like information just pops into my head. It just comes to me, or, I can feel what the animal is trying to tell me. And so it happens in many different ways, where I will be like, I'll talk with someone and I'll be like, okay, I feel like I need to connect with the dog to get information before the session. Because a lot of times during the session, I'm so focused on, there's the human interaction as well. Yes. And so there's a lot of energy of just trying to teach the human what we're doing on a physical level with their dog and a mental and emotional level. And so if I get the information from a soul level beforehand, I don't have to try and be thinking about that.
It makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And so a lot of times, if it's more of a newer client, I will get that information and just ask them to send me a picture, and I'll connect with them quickly. And so that gives me an idea. But if I've been working with the clients for a long time, a lot of times I'll just get that information throughout the session. It just comes to me, and I can feel kind of what is needed. Does that make sense?
That makes absolutely perfect sense to me. We have all kinds of personality types in this world. Some of us are more extroverted. Some of us are more introverted. Some of us, really thrive in, kind of busy, noisy groups and still manage to hear everyone. And for me personally, just not even trying to add in the dog training element, but if I'm doing, let's say, an animal communication session, just between one animal and my pet client, my human client, myself, I'm going to want to have that deep dive conversation with my pet client first, before I have a deep dive conversation with my human client.
Yes.
About what their pet has shared. And that has it's not the way I was originally taught, right. and I had to, and so that's a big piece of it too, is it's part of that mysterious alchemy and kind of working out, for those of you who are listening or watching, if, just kind of working out what feels right to you about how to receive the messages. And I think the most important part that is really exciting about talking with you, Chrissy, is how when the messages start coming in, you're like, yes, and accepting it. Maybe your coach at the time, that was a little too woo for her, but for you, it was like, sure, of course they're talking to me. It's like it's almost like that, what is that really cliched statement that is actually very, very true as well, about whether you believe you can or you believe that you can't, you're still right, either way. And so it's like, well, why not believe the animals are talking to us? It's way cooler. It's a lot more fun. And frankly, it makes a lot more sense because we all have the same basic wiring. Now,
Yeah.
I am curious about whether your pet, your human clients are all, they, I would assume that you're hopefully attracting folks that are really open to the idea of a canine trainer who is talking with both the human and the dog about what's being trained and who's being trained and how the training is going to happen. Have you experienced that everybody's pretty open about it?
Yeah. So that's to go back a little bit, like my background is such science-based that when I started doing animal communication, I was like, what am I doing? Like, and so when I was learning about it down at the school that I was learning from, it was so funny. Like I had to have so many validating experiences until I was like, okay, just trust it, just keep going with it, keep going with it. And so that's been a big part of it, especially with the dog training. It's the kind that I do is very science-based dog training. And so bringing in animal communication, there is a science. We just haven't figured it out very well yet. And so putting that out there to the dog training world was, I've had to like be okay with that and learn how to be okay with that. And luckily my colleagues, they know me well, they, trust me. And so they don't fully believe, but they're willing to be open to that kind of stuff. And as far as my clients, when I was marketing and putting it out there, I was, messing around with different ways of doing it. So having just a dog training package, a dog training and animal communication package, and just an animal communication package. so
yeah, like craziness.
And then I at a point, I was like, I'm going to do a reading on every single dog that I work with, client that I work with. And that wasn't a good idea for me, because some of the clients were like, okay, well, that's good, but I want to just do this, And so I would kind of waste my time trying to help the human client with that. So I've just learned. So I have a bunch of clients that just want to do dog training, and I do my own communication with the dog as we're working together and relay that to the human in terms that they can understand without it being woo-woo. I kind of integrate it into dog training terms. And then I have my clients that just want to do animal communication. And those clients learn about, it's interesting because my brain's going everywhere, but those clients mostly just want the animal communication information, whereas there's some pieces of training that would be helpful, but they're not there yet. And then I have the clients that do both. And that's really fun because they're open to both. And it's like balancing both out. And so it's a very interesting mix of things that are happening. And what I'm seeing by doing both of these, from the 1 foot in soul and 1 foot in science, is that there's a huge disconnect on both sides. It's so interesting. Like from the pure physical dog training side, there's so many people that miss out that there's like so much more to your animal. Like there's such a deeper connection that you could have. And there's so much more than just your animal behaving correctly, and then from the animal communication side, the soul side, there's a lot of people that love their animals so much and energetically want, deep down that communication and soul work that's best for them. But there's a lot of information in the dog training world that they might be using unintentionally, like aversive training, that they don't realize that it would be hurting their animal on a physical level. And then, using them both together, kind of balancing people out. of using both. So that was a long answer.
No, but it's, and there are analogies in the human parent world too. It's like love, saying or really even feeling a deep love for somebody, and then the brass tacks hard work of getting out there and learning the latest cutting edge methods and really making sure that your love in action is positive.
Right.
And is reinforcing that firm foundation of equality and mutual respect. And there's, it's interesting because there more and more researchers and scientists are getting interested in studying and trying to quantify animal communication. And I think as the AI for humans ramps up and we're taking a look at, animals once again are looking like great models for, creating the artificial intelligence. And so there's even a group of researchers out of somewhere in Canada, and I would butcher it, Saskatchewan, I think is how you say it, that are creating controlled studies and doing a lot of they just had their first symposium and really trying to quantify how interspecies communication happens and legitimizing it. And so I think we're a handful of steps away from having a little bit of, those lengthy and rather convoluted white papers that everyone's so fond of to show people who maybe are a little unconvinced that soul has science embedded within it. But it is interesting because it can be tempting to hang out on the soul side where everything feels a little softer. And yet it's deeply unsatisfying when realizing that, let's say you and your dog shared a past life together, or your dog's here to teach you deep lessons about humility and courage, and yet still there's peeing in the house, or somebody's trying to attack the neighbor's cat, that sort of thing. So it's like one does not always solve or ease the other. And so it's a very, just realizing there's some brass tacks mechanics to being embodied and living in a family and living in a community that need to be addressed one way or another. And I actually am really interested by, because you have, of course, I'm old enough to remember the era of, the pack leader mentality and, really kind of what we would call more adverse or negative dog training methods, and having grown up and lived with dogs all our life, and kind of, that perspective of, well, you've got to, very certain types of behaviors that you have to enforce with your dog in order to make sure that they know what they can and can't do. And I'm very grateful we're moving away from that, but now there's a variety of different methods that you use, including clicker training, positive reinforcement. And, is there an intuitive element to how you choose the tools that you use with each animal client? Or do they tell you, I'd like to try clicker training? Or are they feeding you ideas maybe when you get stuck? I'm just curious how that works when maybe you are kind of experiencing a problem, and the idea of actually asking that animal for help. Like, what do you need help with? How can I help you? I mean, how can I train you better? Sounds odd.
Yeah, no, it's totally.
Yeah.
No, well, going back to the last topic we were on, my teacher in animal communication, we were talking about behavior issues, because I work with aggression and that kind of stuff. That's what I mostly work with, like stranger danger and dog aggression and stuff. And so, but we were talking, and it's like, sometimes you can just use training to help the human and the dog. Sometimes you can just use energy work to help the human and the dog. Sometimes you need to do both. So I just wanted to put that out there.
That's very true. It's very true. Trauma is trauma, and until it's released, it's not released. I mean, that talk about two total oversimplifications, but you're right.
Yeah.
Got to release the trauma one way or another.
Right. So yeah. So my approach to dog training is force-free. So it's kind of like we don't use pain, intimidation, or fear to help, our animals or humans. Like, there's,
Right, exactly.
right. You don't want to shame the human either. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I don't want to get all techie or anything, but so there's different quadrants in training. So there's positive reinforcement. So what we're doing there is teaching the animal, like, this is, what we would like you to do. And when you do it, we're going to mark it with a click or a word. That's the clicker training part. And then we're going to reinforce with a treat or something that's reinforcing for the animal. It could be play or whatever. But most of the time, food is highly reinforcing or treats.
Yeah. For both pets and people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So clicker training is a subset of positive reinforcement. So we're teaching the animal what we would like them to do, and so we teach them the behavior. They do it. As soon as they do it, we mark it with a click, and then we reinforce. And so that's how we increase the behaviors that we want. And then there's negative reinforcement. That's more aversive, where if you think about it, so it's adding an aversive, like a prong or choke collar. And then when they do the right behavior, the pressure is off. So that's negative reinforcement. So the positive means adding something. The negative means taking something away. And then you have positive punishment, which is like a electric shock or kicking or hitting or something like that. I know, it's crazy. Trainers still do this. It's not good.
I know.
And then there's negative punishment, which is more like a timeout, like taking something away that the dog loves. So typically as a force-free trainer, I will use positive reinforcement, and I don't want to get too techie. I'm trying not to get too techie.
It's okay. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
To understand the options and have the lingo.
Yes.
Now when I have a pet client who's new to being a puppy parent, and like, go listen to this podcast and she will walk you through the basics of the options that you have, and you can decide,
Yeah. And then, so as force-free trainers, we typically use the positive reinforcement and then the negative punishment. So, the reinforcement means increasing a behavior. Positive means adding something, and then punishment means decreasing a behavior, and then negative means taking something away. So it's, it's a little more complicated, but there are trainers that use force-free training methods, and then there are trainers that use aversive training methods. And it's a matter of what kind of relationship you want to have with your dog. Like, I want to have a relationship based on trust, and I want the dog to trust me. And, I want to teach the dog, and I want to learn from the dog as well. And so it's a partnership. And
yeah, it's interesting because there have been many times when I've been talking to a pet during an animal communication session or an energy healing session where it becomes very clear that animal is unable to stop the troublesome behavior without some healing work at some level, whether it's something like motion code or body code or Reiki or acupressure or chiropractic or some other EFT tapping is a big one that I use a lot, the emotional freedom technique for trauma release, because when we're fearful and when we feel unstable in our environment and in our relationships, sometimes that is like when the simplest example is I went to the chiropractor this morning and he's like, I think we can get this little pop in your neck if you just relax. And I'm like, I can't seem to do it because there's something inside of me that thinks you're trying to break my neck when you move me that way. And it's like, and I can feel my body like actively resisting
Tensing up,
the good thing that he's trying to do. And it's like, so it's, it is important to like, have you ever had an experience where a pet has shared with you that they are holding on to trauma or past bad memories, or they're just so fearful that they literally cannot do the thing and they need something else before they can come back to the training session and feel a little calmer and more confident to be able to, learn whatever it is that you're trying to, or unlearn whatever it is that you're trying to work with.
And that's part of the combination of training and communication that I do too. There's, I worked with aggression is typically fear. It's just a dog that's fearful. And so I typically will do a lot of healing work, grounding and chakra stuff, and just a lot of energy work to kind of help them relax. But then part of dog training is also creating positive associations. So one, there's teaching a dog a behavior to do, but there's also counter conditioning desensitization, which is changing that emotional response to a trigger. So we do that in training as well. So I will do a combination of energy healing as well as counter conditioning desensitization to kind of get them over, the fear.
Yeah. Now I have another question. This might be a little bit awkward, but have you ever had one of your pet clients tell you that it's their human who needs training? It's like, well, so much, I am performing perfectly, but my human can't seem to get it together, or is giving me mixed messages or.
Yes, so much. Yeah. Even without the pet telling me, I'm like, okay, you need to work on the human side. But yes, I've had many, I've had a dog tell me that the human needs to go to therapy. I've had, and the dog is like, I know what I'm doing, they need to figure it out, in a nice way, they say it.
Well, animals too tend to be much kinder and more empathic. And this feels like something that arises in them because they have been, so they know what it feels like to be marginalized and to feel powerless. And so their empathy factor for someone else that might be going through any kind of emotional trauma or trouble is so high. But they also don't seem to be afraid of telling the truth.
No, that's what I love about it. It's just like, whatever, the other thing I do for people that want a reading and training is I will look at kind of where both souls are. And at that time, I look at agreements between the animal and the human. And then I, ask questions that the human wanted. And I ask for messages that the animal wants to give to the human. And there's, like you said, there's just always so much good information that the dog wants to give to the human. And I have to do it in a way that is empathetic to the human as well. So they don't, get their feelings hurt or anything like that. And so, but in a lot of, it's just so interesting. I had a client who the dog just passed away, and I did.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And I did multiple readings on him as he was getting older for the senior stuff. And I'm like, and he went to rehab therapy for 2 years for his body. And he's like, I need warmer water and I need ultrasound and I need, and he's like, my back right leg is numb. So I relayed all that information and we did all this stuff, and they looked at his leg and they're like, no, it's pain. It's not numb. And so finally a year later, they're like, oh yes, it is numb. Because he started to have the actual foot drop and all that kind of stuff. So that is also really interesting too, is relaying some medical, I'm not a vet. I'm not going to
say of course not. Yeah.
But it's always nice to have vets that are open to listening to information that we have and relaying it to them. And so that's always really helpful as well.
This is true. And really, in the greater vision for what we're trying to do on this show and it feels like in our twin fields, it is, in your dual fields, it really feels like, really wanting to create a team to help. And ideally, we human animals would have a team too. And I find often we are more motivated when we feel like our animal is suffering to create a team for them versus, we still don't tend to our own suffering as proactively maybe as we could or we should, and that can impact our pets as well. But that's another area where I feel like, animal intelligence is still kind of not always a compliment, and yet our animals again are paving the path for us by showing us, it does take a team. It can take I look at pet training a lot like, the kinds of courses we should have for kids in school, like interpersonal communication skills and how to deal with conflict and how to communicate with one another clearly so we don't have issues with aggression and submission and all kinds of, it's like, we all need this stuff, it's not totally a species thing.
No, I know it's not. It's like learning how to communicate with your heart and mind, and the emotions and stuff. And another thing too, in regards to training and the energy work, animal communication, is a lot of dogs that have behavior issues also have underlying medical issues that are causing behavior issues. And so that's really helpful to be able to do both. Like if I'm doing when I'm first meeting with them, I can't think of the word right now.
The reading?
No, when I'm doing the dog training.
Like an intake?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Like an evaluation kind of thing?
Yeah. When I'm first doing that, there's always the idea, okay, is this medically related or is it just true straight behavior? And so a lot of times doing a reading will help kind of be like, okay, take them to the vet and see what they see about this, and this, and make sure nothing's going on. So that's a way to combine them as well.
Yeah. And I hope, those of you who are listening and watching, if you have a passion for animals and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way that, my background and my skills could possibly come together. Let me just tell you, I should publish my resume one day, such as it is. You think that you can't find a more diverse set of, I've done everything from run around in an orange suit and hawk holistic lip balm to found and run an eating disorder charity. I mean, you can't find, there's no thread. And yet, here I am. And here you started with human medicine, working with Olympians. And frankly, most of our animals on their worst day can physically outperform the best of us. And so it just, just imagine as if there is a synergy and just play and just consider, if the dream and the intention is there, the pathway will appear. And it sucks, doesn't it, sometimes that's the way it has to be, right? We take the step and then we get the little flashlight come in showing in our next step. And most of us just want to race right towards the finish line. And, just be like, honor yourself for having that desire and for having a vision into what doesn't appear to be visionable as of yet. And just allow that to lead you forward, which is really part of the new paradigm anyway. Or when our animals are resistant or recalcitrant or there's something going on, it's like it's teaching us to dig deeper and to look, okay, well, could it be medical? Could it be behavioral? Could it be trauma? Could it be, past lives? Could it be me? It's causing, it's like there's so many different threads to follow and there's always something new to explore, and we open ourselves up when we do it. So Chrissy, I am so grateful that you've made time to be here today and talk about such important and deep deep ways to connect with our animals across species boundaries. And I always want to give some time, because we're coming up to the end of our time, and I want to make sure that you share anything that you want our listeners and viewers to know about how to reach out to you, how to work with you, what you would recommend for them, where to get started, that sort of thing, or just any advice or words of wisdom you might have to share.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun. It's like the first time I've been able to talk about both, in one place.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I've so enjoyed talking to you.
It's so cool. No, I would just say, like you were saying, just kind of trust, like whatever you're being pulled to, just trust it and go with it, even though it makes absolutely no sense, or you might be fearful or scared, or what will other people think. Just trust it and follow those different paths, and it will come together. I remember feeling like that as I was doing both. I'm like, oh my gosh, how long do I have to do this? Like, when is it going to happen? Yeah. And so,
absolutely.
So I would just say, take the time to learn what you're doing, like whatever different things you're doing, dive into them, and just don't worry what's going to happen ahead of time. Just learn what you're being pulled to at that point. So that's kind of the advice I have there. And then it's an ongoing thing. It's just ongoing changing. It always is changing. And then in regards to me, like if you want to reach out to me, my website is, my business is called The Nature of Animals, but my website is called theanimalnature.com. And I'm on Facebook. I have a business page, and then I'm on Instagram for The Nature of Animals. And I'm currently in the process of building a blended online program to do some online. Cool. Yeah, so that's taking a huge amount of time, but so I'm in the process of doing that. It's like in person and online, and it's specifically going to be for resource guarding. But what I want to do is start integrating how people can connect deeper with their animals, and it's a great behavior to do it with, because there's so much body language and communication and mindset changes and so much stuff that goes into that. So that's going to be hopefully done in December. So, but otherwise, yeah, I just work with clients privately, and I'm in the process of building that program. So
this just sounds wonderful. And, since this is pre-recorded, by the time it airs, we'll be a lot closer to your launch date, most likely. Oh, so that'll be really neat for folks to be able to connect with you about that. But Chrissy, thank you so much again for being here and for sharing so openly and honestly into, and, kind of in a number of different areas where it just kind of feels like the politeness person in all of us just wants to go, oh, it's okay, and it's like, no, we really, we need to talk about this stuff, and we need to kind of open up and look at where some of our own maybe resistances are, where somebody is just like, no, I just want to focus on dog training. And it's like, because that may be where their vulnerability or their fear factor is. It's like, I just want to keep it on this level. And then the soul level, it's like, okay, I'm resisting just getting practical, because it might mean I have to wade into some difficult conversations and some hard areas. And so it's like really stretching and growing us no matter how we look at it. And ultimately, I love what you said about just follow whatever it is that you're interested in learning about. It doesn't have to make sense, because sense, again, is that thinking brain heading back into its past to see if it can find any patterns or experiences or memories that correspond with where you're trying to go. And you've never been where you're trying to go before, so it's not going to find anything. Gosh darn it.
And then it's going to be like, no.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and it might be a saber-toothed tiger, so best not to,
Right.
So it's like, it's very important to just realize when our wiring, or, which is something we all species share in common, our fight or flight or freeze wiring is getting involved, and just tell it it's okay, give it a lollipop and send it off to watch some kind of really sweet little Disney movie and just go on with your day.
Yeah.
So those of you who are watching or listening here at Let's Talk to Animals, just know that your time and your attention is so appreciated. We're still still a young show, even though we're in season 3, and we really appreciate you being a part and sharing a bit of your time with us each day. Share this with a friend who loves animals, and this particular episode, definitely with a friend who loves dogs and keeps company with dogs. And please like, subscribe, do all the usual stuff, and come back again next week, because we're going to have another wonderful guest for you, sharing about all things animal communication and related. So how about that? If you want to find me and access all of the episodes of Let's Talk to Animals, you can head over to animallovelanguages.com. I also have a free animal communication camp that will walk you through some of the basics that Chrissy and I have been talking about today, in case you're just like, what in the heck? Like, I get feelings and memories and whatever. And it's like, okay, so you can learn a little bit about that. And then, of course, Chrissy is at the Animal Nature, and she shared with you how to find her. And we hope we will both hear from you. How about that? And we're sending you our love and blessings for you and your interspecies family. Okay, bye for now, and see you again next week.